I need to.
Fucking metronome every time.
Recording.
Oh, I got to click as well today.
Young Clicky.
1 second. I'm trying to find this one bit in this book that I was looking at like ages ago.
All right. Right, I've not read those ones. Those are to do.
Right, bookmark.
The beauty of a bookcase, though. Actually, no, I'll save that for the episode.
Yeah, please. That's a good one, man.
I'm glad I've quelled your taste buds right there.
Is everybody ready?
Got that from a book.
Oh, you ready?
I think so.
Yeah.
Am
what
I
we doing?
recording? Recording in progress. Cool. Hello and welcome back to Sitting In. Today you're listening to episode 10, and we have something nice to talk about today. I'm gonna do that again. That was bad.
It's episode 11.
Ah,
Also, we need to remember the buy me a coffee.
got you. Cool. All right, cool. I've got a bit actually. I just got.
All right, let's go.
Let's go! Hello and welcome back to Sitting In. You're listening to episode 11 and you're joined by Callum Stevenson, Jack Handyside, and yours truly, Mr. Rice Gilchrist. And I've been thinking, you know what I really dislike? You know the plug of a shower? You know when you live with a female and like hair gets trapped in the plug? Like, that is the bane of my life in the mornings. How do you two feel about, like, hairy plugs?
Hate it so much. I hate that we have to plug hairy plugs.
Yeah. And if you are listening to this and you have a solution to that, where you don't have to, like, constantly pour that stuff down to, like, melt all the hair, let us know. But on that note, another thing that I really dislike is when all I have to drink is tap water. Which brings me on to a very important note. First, make sure you do drink enough water. But second, if you want to support us, you can buy us a coffee via the link in the podcast description. That will go towards making sure that we don't just drink water and we actually have coffee and nice bean juice to fuel these episodes. Because, you know, water's like great. And you'll realize that I'm Scottish and I don't pronounce my T's. So when I say water, I say water. But anyway, that was just my little bit on the Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to support us, you know where to do it. Link in the description. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Handyside, who's going to introduce today's episode.
Of course, yeah, this is an exciting one. So we thought we'd take in a different direction today, and we would start talking a little bit about literature. So, cue the celebration noises and the turning of pages. Yeah, we were just talking about like inspirational books as well that have kind of helped us along the way. And you know, the first kind of question that we all sort of had was like, well, do you just mean music books, or do you mean, you know, like what scale books did you look at that helped you build up your technique? But for me, at least, you know, when you asked that, Reese, it got my mind thinking to some books that I've read very recently, and I'm sure that we'll get into all kinds of things, you know, biographies and theory books and other strange books as well. But for me personally, I take a lot of inspiration from literature. It's a big part of how I think about teaching. It's a big part of how I think about writing as well.
You just said big fart.
I did. I did. That's a podcast moment right there. But yeah, I've always found literature to be quite a big inspiration for just changing my perspective on things as well. And most recently, the thing that I've been reading, where is it? You know, again, this is the thing. The beauty of a bookcase is you can have hundreds of books in there and you don't have to have read them. That's a topic for another day, though. Yes, so the thing I've been reading at the moment is a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, which is by Dr. Oliver Sacks, who died maybe about 5 years ago, I'd say. And Dr. Sacks was played by Robin Williams in the... Oh, interesting. There you go, yeah. Which one is that? The music...
Musicophilia.
Ah, I see.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, great. We both know about Oliver Sacks. Well, Oliver Sacks famously was played by Robin Williams in the film Awakenings, and Oliver Sacks is most famous for his work as a neurologist, basically. So he works with the brain. Very interesting. And he made the discovery of people who had sleeping sickness, which was a sickness that came about in, I think, the 1920s or 30s and affected people all the way into their later years, into their adult lives. And they basically froze up like statues. And he was somebody that experimented with L-Dopa, which is like synthetic dopamine, basically. So the stuff that you would find in ecstasy, essentially. And these people woke up. So he was very much he was influenced and he was interested in finding out about people with rare neurological diseases. And the interesting thing reading this book as well, the man who mistook his wife for a hat, is that you would think, great, well, it's a book about neurology supposedly, or strange cases, and it is about that. That's what the title of the book is, and it's how he takes it as well. And so there's a lot of theoretical language in there, which I profess to know absolutely none of. So it is a bit of a head spinner, I suppose, pardon the pun. But I think, the really interesting thing about that book is the interest that he takes in each of his patients. So he sets the scene of the very first chapter is about the man who mistook his wife for a hat, who was a musician. He was a classical musician. And these are all real people as well. They're not, their identities aren't hidden. Nothing has kind of changed. These are real people that he's talking about. Documented cases as well, some of which we now know the answers to, but obviously back when he was writing about this stuff, which I believe was the 50s or 60s, that kind of time, they simply didn't have the information or the technology to know what we know now. And I think the thing that really hit home, or has been hitting home for me, is a I suppose it's a point of contention that he really has about the practice of medicine and the application, if you like, of medicine to things that sound very similar but are very different. And I think for me, thinking about what I do as well, it really hits home. So his whole idea is that a lot of the time doctors take the patient at face value. They take the patient for their illness, and so the illness is the thing that's addressed. Therefore, this is somebody with this illness rather than the person, really. And I think the interesting thing about Oliver Sacks is he takes an interest in the individual. And so he makes it really clear about this is a guy who's a musician and this is his family. He'll talk you through in the first chapter about, I don't want to spoil it obviously, but he talks you through the first chapter of meeting his first patient and the strange issues that pop up for him, and how he's kind of trying to think round this guy's way of thinking, because he looks at pictures of family members and he can't recognize them, but he can recognize students in his classes. He's a professor at one of the music colleges. He can recognize his students by how they sing or how they play or that sort of thing, but he can't recognize faces, and he can't follow storylines as well. He can't follow the reason that people kind of do things as well. But more than that, it was his way of addressing the person most at the foremost. And it's really interesting because I think, like a doctor, I think as musicians or as teachers, we can get into the habit of addressing our students in a way that's like, okay, they have one problem, then we solve that. It's kind of a bit of a transactional relationship in that they need this from us, we do this, on to the next one, new relationship, or new opportunity or whatever. And I think the really interesting thing is, like, as soon as you start taking interest in the person, you start taking an interest in how this person lives with this difficulty, or how this person is trying to kind of think their way around it as well. So it's very much a book about trying to see from others' perspectives rather than seeing what you want to see, or trying to kind of see from your perspective all the time, I suppose, as well. And at least, from an educational standpoint, I think a lot of education is about trying to find your way out of your own perspective, or try to develop lots of ways to see one problem-solving method, or perhaps seeing one issue as well. But that's one that for me personally, I've taken a lot of inspiration from. It's been really good. But what about you guys? What kind of stuff are you reading as well, and how has it influenced your way right now?
Just one question. When did you read that book? Just curious.
I'm still reading it, in fact.
Still
so I'm
reading it,
only
cool.
about halfway through it.
Oh, nice. Great. I just added it to my list. I've started a new thing, this year, where I find it hard to make the time, or maybe allow myself the time to sit and read a book. Now, I do have a lot of books I want to talk about, but I have actually been listening to more audiobooks this year because I find that it's just easier for me to read. Well, I guess I'm not reading in that case. I'm listening to a book, but I find it so much easier because I can couple it with doing something like going out a walk or shopping or the dishes or something else that I don't have to think too hard about. And so I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks actually. I think I've got one, two, three, four. Yeah, I managed to get through 5 audiobooks this year. And for me, like I wouldn't even get through 5 books in a year. Like I just never ever got into a really good habit of reading, I guess. But yeah, let me think about what I'm going to talk about because there's so many books that I do want to sort of shout out. But maybe I should just tell you what I've recently been listening to or reading and how it's affected me. So I listened to this really interesting book called The Backyard Adventure. And I don't know if you don't know who Bo Miles is, he's this Australian guy. And we'd call him, he's Raj. He's just mental. And what I mean by that is, he's this character, this ginger, and this is a real guy, by the way. He's got a YouTube channel. This ginger Australian guy, got a wife, kid, lives away in the middle of nowhere, and he just does weird stuff, like canoes to work, and just sees how long it takes. Like he finds a way to canoe to work and like makes a thing out of it, makes a film. And I read his book called The Backyard Adventure, and it's basically about, I think he started it during, oh no, it's a sum of a lot of big projects he had done. And he just talks about why he done them, and I guess the sum of it is that you don't need to look farther than your backyard to like find something fun to do. And his whole point is that like, you know, we're all stuck inside on our phones and computers and the metaverse, as Jack was talking about last week. We forget what's really happening just like outside, and that there's so much opportunity to be had with like the simple things of like, I mean, he takes it to the extreme, like canoeing to work and walking to work, and it takes him days, and he just sleeps at the side of the road and does all these weird things. But I really enjoyed that. It just kind of reminded me that, you know, we got to get out and we got to do things, and it doesn't always have to be governed by technology. I am just going to list a few that I've been talking about listening to. Another one that I really enjoyed was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankel. Has anybody checked out that? So the original title for that book was, what was it called? I think it was called From Death Camp to Existentialism. And it's a good summary of kind of what the book's about. Man's Search for Meaning is like, it's quite poetic, but yeah, it's about this guy who was a therapist. Wait, was it a therapist? Crap, I forgot. Yeah, I think he was a therapist, and he ended up in a concentration camp, but he did survive it, and he just talks about the whole process of that and like the stuff he witnessed. It's a really good storytelling book, but then the latter half is more of like a scientific analysis of what happened to people and like how they dealt with it and so on. And yeah, that was super exciting, and I feel like it was just it's quite inspiring, I guess, you know, hearing someone who's like been there and gotten out. I feel like my book review skills are like nothing compared to Jack's. I feel like I'm just gonna like I listened to Peppa Pig's audiobook, and it made me happy. But hey, got to rock with it. I've got one other that I want to tell you about. I listened to the Herbie Hancock Possibilities autobiography, and that was really interesting just to hear about Herbie Hancock's life. Most of the books I have read in the last 2 years have been biographies or autobiographies. I always find it really interesting hearing from particularly jazz artists who were, they were kind of either on the cusp or like right in the time when it was really hot, and just how their lives turned out. Like Herbie Hancock's, I think it leans a little bit too much on the whole Buddhist thing near the end. Like it becomes a little bit too much about that, but yeah, guys had a trip. But yeah, without going into any of the other ones on my left, I have a couple that I wanna talk about. I'll pass it on to Callum. Sorry for my bad book review skills.
Well, I was just going to mention that you think yours are bad. You know, I think the tier system is going to go Jack, Reese, and then way down here where you can't see on the camera is me. So we'll see where we go. But yeah, mine's might be a wee bit I don't know, maybe kind of out there, but like I enjoy philosophy. I really love my philosophy. So I've got a couple books here. This one I was reading in PDF form first, and I just loved even just like kind of first few passages so much that I was reading this one, Politics by Aristotle. And that one, it's weird how, the kind of topic at hand is like kind of what we've been saying. It's like what things are influencing us, like what things are kind of maybe helping us convey certain things to students in the kind of teaching world and things like that. A lot of more kind of stoicism and like almost like kind of quotes and stuff like that as well, but just like teachings of philosophy and maybe stoicism have helped me kind of, like what we were mentioning in episode 10. Let me see if I can remember what we were talking about. It was when students are in the room, and they can't perform what they felt like they could when they were at home. And it's always something that's I've always made like the student feel kind of very like safe in that space, because they always think like there's no explanation to why they can't perform the way that they do in the house. I think that just that added pressure of having someone else observing and almost like kind of positively critiquing and like problem solving and finding ways to improve on those things, it really highlights all the errors. But it's also the perspective thing. It's also now there's a listener, and now there's someone else that can hear the things that you can't perceive when you're in the moment, when you're actually doing the thing. So there's a lot of things there that have been very influential in terms of just how I teach, how I speak. Lots of things that are really good kind of takeaways. And one of the things that I'll always say if someone's like really messing things up, just get the repetitions in. Just like keep getting the repetitions in, and I guarantee that baseline of where you were at home will just creep up. It's like one of these things where maybe say we practice our stuff for like 3 hours a day, and at that kind of like 2-3 hour mark, you're feeling really warmed up, and you're feeling like the technical chops are there, things are flowing, and then you go to it the next day, and it's not quite the same. And it's because like I feel like you maybe start here. Here's your baseline, and you creep up over those 3 hours. But then you would hope that the next day it's like it still feels as good. But what I feel like happens is that baseline just a little bit higher than your baseline from before. But you can't see it, because you're the person that's so aware of all the microscopic changes in your playing that it doesn't feel like there's any progress. But then as soon as the teacher sees something the next week, it's like they've not seen any of those microscopic changes throughout the whole week. And then, the teacher's response is like, I can see you've put in the hours. Like, I can see all the things that you've been working on. And that's something that keeps happening with students that always feel like they can't, they don't see themselves performing the way that they do from home to in the lesson. So that's just one little thing that I got into just from some of those things. I've got quite a few books here, and I don't know, again, book reviewing skills are all over the place, so I don't know where I'm going to go. But some politics, here's a great one actually, before we kind of move on. This is the Daily Stoic, and it's 366 meditation. It's basically like a quote a day. So maybe I just open it up on the 31st of today and we see what's what we've got. I've kind of cheated. I've went a wee bit ahead and read into February's just because I was enjoying it.
That's not very stoic of you to skip days.
I know, but that's long bus journeys home from East Lothian. It's just I just go with it, go with the flow. Right, what have we got? Philosophy as medicine of the soul. So yeah, there's like the quote itself, and then there's like an interpretation of it.
Give us a quote.
So the quote: "Don't return to philosophy as a taskmaster, but as patients seek our relief in a treatment of sore eyes, or a dressing for a burn, or from an ointment. Regarding it in this way, you'll obey reason without putting it on display and rest easy in its care." Now, when I read a lot of the quotes, again, something that I've learned from philosophy, I don't get the whole picture, like even after the 10th time of reading it. So I'll usually have to read that like lots of times. So do you think, before I actually read the interpretation, do you think you've got like, what's your interpretation of that quote?
Can you read it again?
Yeah, of course. So don't return to philosophy as a taskmaster, but as patients seek out relief in a treatment of sore eyes, or a dressing for a burn, or from an ointment, regarding it this way, you'll obey reason without putting it on display and rest easy in its care.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Let me take a stab at it. Why not? So I might be getting this way, way wrong, but I think oftentimes, and like I suppose we're all guilty of it now, in that we can consume so much information online. You know, we can literally you can go through millions and millions of accounts that are like alpha motivation or like financial motivation, or you know, whatever it is, things that get you out of bed, or I don't know, the YouTube channels that seem to kind of just put out endless content that's supposed to inspire you and make you feel creative. I think a lot of the time people fall back on that stuff, or at least the quote sounds like it's saying that. People fall back on that stuff as a way to motivate you to go about and try and live it. But I think the issue with philosophy is that without actually applying and doing those things, all of it is just simply kind of like I was saying about my books that just simply pile up, that they look great on the bookcase, but I'm never actually reading them. And there is this place for absorbing information and actually trying to apply it, rather than just kind of trying to continually absorb it and accept it as truth, really. But yeah, I think there's also a level of comfort, though, in philosophy is such a wide subject that you can find a reason to rationalize pessimism and optimism. So regardless of how you're feeling on the day, whether you're feeling great, whether you're feeling sad, whether you feel like the universe is aligned or not, there's always somebody who has theorized, you know, well, there you go, a theory as to why you feel the way that you do. But yeah, trying not to use that as a crux and actually trying to live your life first and think about it later is, at least to me, that's kind of how the quote would read. How close am I?
Reese, do you want to have a stab, or will I go into the
I'll just go for it. Jack, I think, summarized it pretty well there.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's spot on. It sounds like it's incredibly relevant to, you know, just as like the feeling of maybe burning out and things. So I'll read the next bit. So the busier we get, the more we work and learn and read, the further we may drift. We get in a rhythm, we're making money, being creative, and we're stimulated and busy. It seems like everything is going well, but we drift further and further from philosophy. Eventually, this neglect will contribute to a problem. The stress builds up, our mind gets cloudy, we forget what's important, and result in an injury of some kind. When that happens, it's important that we tap the brakes, put aside all the momentum and the moment, return to the regimen and practices that we know are rooted in clarity, good judgment, good principles, and good health. Stoicism is designed to be medicine for the soul. It relieves us from the vulnerabilities of modern life. It restores us from the vigor we need to thrive in life. Check in with today and let it do its healing.
Oh, it's way off.
Oh, like I feel like there's so much in there that's what you were saying. And I feel like, I don't know, that's just, I definitely feel like I see something in there that's like stars have aligned with things that we spoke about in terms of like being too busy, and kind of like, for me personally, just what was mentioned with the gig, the big build up, maybe acting more serious because of that build up, and forgetting to kind of be more present and have those little bits, maybe more kind of chill times and more present moments, which are difficult to have when there's all these things in the calendar.
Yeah, I get that.
So it feels like that's along those lines. That's, you know, that little reminder that it's not something that we do to kind of combat all the busyness.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that we do to kind of come back to the presence kind of thing. But yeah, I'll pass it on. But that's a nice one from that one. I think that's been really
wow. That's really interesting, man. I'll have to get the name of that properly so I can note that down. Because it sounds like a really good read. I do think it's funny, you know, you're saying draw a parallel, and I know we're a music podcast, so we're always kind of like trying to relate things that way as well. But there is a parallel to Stoicism and how we think about like what we do every day as well, and what we kind of train ourselves towards. And one thing I see quite a lot is somebody explained this to me. It's really funny, as time traveling, right? Time traveling is you sitting down to practice. And not that, you know, you sit down to practice in your pajamas and suddenly you're in Carnegie Hall, but that you're sitting down to play, and you're imagining applying that information or that thing that you're doing, or you're trying to kind of almost imagine that you are doing that on a stage or in a band or in a whatever. That's the time traveling aspect of things, and it's counterintuitive to what Stoicism teaches, which is very much just about being present and trying to be content with the present, which is is a hard thing in life, but it's even harder in practice as well, and just kind of feeling okay with the instrument. And I know last week we talked about obviously you guys' gig, and how the experience of that gig is great. You don't come upon it a lot of times, but that experience of like getting used to how uncomfortable it can be to be present on a stage with a whole band where your monitors are feeding back, there's people in the audience, you don't really know if this works, if this is in tune, if this person can hear you, and it's like trying to learn and become comfortable with accepting that sort of reality is I don't know, I suppose you can see Stoicism in all walks of life as well, but I think as musicians as well, it's fun to see where it's applicable.
I have a question for the both of you, because this is something that I have like struggled with just forever. I would be lucky in previous years if I'd got through like maybe like 3 books max. Like for me, that would be like pretty good, like in a year. Obviously now I've been using Audible because it works for me. But what role does reading play in your week? You know, like, do you set time aside? How do you do that? Like, what does your reading time look like?
For me, it's definitely coming back, but for a good few months, it was just non-existent. But it's something I really love, like especially go and find a coffee shop. I think I mentioned it before, but find a coffee shop and just go and do some reading for a good like hour and a bit. And I would routinely do that. Just yeah, when I'm in a kind of good habit of reading, and I definitely feel it's like it's not something that's you can't quantify how it helps you in your day to day, but it just does. Like it definitely with things that I'm reading just feels like certain things like what we just did there. It kind of feels like that quote that I just read from 31st of January is fairly relevant, but we wouldn't have known that if we didn't just get into that and see what happens. So it's the same kind of thing if you're reading a lot of stuff and then like you just never know if any of the stuff that you read is going to be applicable to maybe a lesson, like or really valuable for one specific individual because of an experience that they've had. And you can maybe just share something that, again, perspective, Jack, you were talking about that earlier. The ability to have someone else's eye or ear just kind of see or hear something that you can't, so that you can gain a different perspective. And that's actually what I love about, like being open or just sharing ideas or sharing a lot of things is you gain other people's perspective. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. I think it was now I'm thinking of a Jim Carrey quote. I think it's Jim Carrey. It's one of the ones where it's like, too much isolation is like, it can kind of take you away from reality. I think not having other people's perspective it's just I find having people's perspective is super useful. But yeah, it's super important for me, so I'm trying to make it more of a habit.
I like that. Yeah, Reese, will you give me the question again as well?
The question is just what role does reading play in your week, let's just say, and how do you make a habit out of it? Because I in the past have struggled with that.
Oh, I still struggle with making a habit of it, and I think I've learned a couple things as well, because I read lots of different kinds of things, but I don't read consistently. And for such a long time, I thought, well, it's because I don't like reading. I don't want to do it then, so I won't do it. But actually, it's not that. It's that I don't understand what kind of reader I am. And I think there's always, there's always these things that say if you want to instill a new habit, you've got to do it for a certain amount of time. Sure, that makes sense. But reading is not like, it's not something to be drilled. It's something to try to enjoy, and it's something to take a retreat from, whether it's technology or screens or whatever, or your own perspective. That's a great one, Callum, as well. I really like that. Yeah, I think the thing that I found hard is sort of settling on what kind of reader I am, because I'm not a fast reader at all. And I had to learn that out the hard way. Like I was really interested last year in some of Dostoevsky's work, and see if I can pull up a book of Dostoevsky. They are massive. Yeah, check this one out. This one is horrible. The problem is, though, I got absorbed in the blurb, and then I thought, well, I'll just read a couple pages. This is how big it is. And I'm sure there's people who have, read The Lord of the Rings that have gone, oh, that's nothing. I've read a doorstop of literature. But for me, it was really tough just to get through a book like that as well. And also a book that's talking about concepts that are really, really tough to break down. I mean, they're obviously translated as well from the original Russian. So there's a lot of kind of very interesting uses of language as well. But again, Cam, like you're saying, there are lots of different perspectives, even on the story that's presented or the ideas that are in there as well. But I really learned something about myself as a reader. For one, I got to the end of it and went, oh, great, I've achieved it. I've got through this book. I'm going to go and tell everybody. I'm going to post it on Facebook. I didn't do any of those things. But I did remember, or I did realize, I should say, I did realize that the kind of reader I am, I have to be reading maybe like 10 pages a day to really get through even just something small. 10 pages is not a lot to some. And to other people, they think 10 pages, man, even half of that, it's just like, where am I going to find the time? But I think it's about two things. It's about finding out what kind of reader you are. What do you want to take from books is a great one as well. And when do you read? When do you read? And the thing I have noticed, and it's why I've kind of got back more into a rhythm of it, just naturally of reading, is reading at night. I read something online that was saying that you should try to kind of get rid of screens from your wind down of the day. And if you can do that an hour before, that's really great. I'm someone, I kind of struggle to do that, from being honest. Like, I like reading all kinds of things, whether it's the news or it's the football stuff, or it's just looking at really garbage memes. That's my life, and I love it. But I have noticed as well, just general sleep improves when I depart from screens for the day. And I think finding time to even just sit for like half an hour or whatever and read, it really, it really caps off the day nicely, and it just gives you a different experience as well. But I also retain a lot more of that information, which is really great. But yeah, I would just say, if you struggle with reading, it's those two things. It's like, find out what kind of reader you are, because you might be the sort of person that can sit and just, tear through a book, or you might be somebody who finds it really difficult, like I do. And then try to, measure when it is that you read as well, and how important that is.
Yeah, I think my thing is that I don't actually think I learn best by reading. Like, it took me a long time to realize that as well, because I'd done my degree and all that and had to read loads of stuff, but I don't know, like, the books that I have learnt a lot from, I've like tore apart and annotated and drawn all over. But yeah, maybe I need to create that relationship with reading again. But I would much rather hear and see it. And like, I feel like I retain information when I see people like speaking it. So maybe there's a bit of learning in there for me, working out how I don't know, different ways to engage with literature. But I do find the Audible, has been quite good. But when I think back to books, I struggle to express like what the thing is of it, like what the point of it was. I think I maybe just, there's a missing link when I consume that kind of stuff. I need to find a way to digest it. But high school was great, because I remember you'd have a book for like a year, and you had to like analyze it all. I just wish I made myself go through that process with every book that I've read, because I would know it so much better. Like, yeah, I'm listening to a book right now. Do you know *Sapiens*? A Brief History of Mankind, Humankind. There we go. So I'm getting through that, and I think I'm like a third of the way through maybe. But there's so much in it that like I can't remember all the different types of things he was saying existed in the first chapter. It's like there's so much in it. But yeah, I don't know.
There is that thing though, like, I think as a reader as well, and there's a side of this as well that's the same for getting out of music school, I would say. When you're in school, you are made to analyze things in the way that kind of meets the syllabus. So you're made to kind of draw links to things. You're made to kind of understand every single story arc and whatever, which is tough. It's a really hard way to digest a book. It might be the most thorough way to digest a book, and that's great. And believe me, like through university as well, I did the same thing as well. I'd pick out books and then I'd sit and like write notes, not notes on the books, because that would get me in so much trouble. But like reading things and trying to digest every single paragraph, I realized that, again, like, it's the same sort of thing with finding out what kind of reader you are, is that you have to break that mold once in a while and read something that read something just for the face value that it presents, rather than feeling like you have to jump into it so much as well. But I completely get that side of what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I actually enjoyed the whole like tearing it apart. In high school, I think we were made to buy a version of the book or something like that. Or yeah, they must have, or they printed it out. Anyway, I enjoyed that, and I'm looking at all these books that I wanted to talk about. I'm thinking like if I could go through that process with each one of these, I'd get so much more out of it. And I think the beauty of like a book is that you can just open it up again and like get back into it. A lot of people, and I've been guilty of this, and I think Jack, you've expressed it as well, is that when you finish a book, is that you feel that sense of achievement. You're like, I finished the book. And it's like, yeah, but like, how much did you really get? And I think my issue is maybe I've not quite found a way for me to get the most out of these books. Maybe it's a case of just returning to it again and again. And I find, yeah, like I'm looking at this book that I started reading sometime, The War of Art, and I can't remember any of it. And it was like a year ago, you know? But Callum, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like I don't have that thing of needing to finish the book, because I think one of the things that the whole philosophy thing has taught me is that like I can always gain more understanding of things. So I'm always very willing to just again get just like we practice in music. There's so many parallels that I see between like reading or just anything, to be brutally honest. Anything from how you connect like two bars together in a piece of music that are technically demanding to your understanding of like two sentences in a philosophy book, where it's like you just maybe we can't grasp all the words individually and what the intention is, first of all, like what is meant by the writer, and then what is your understanding of it. But I think, yeah, I'm constantly like, I think I've read the beginning of this book, The Politics by Aristotle, like 5 times, and I've not moved further than that, because the first part before it actually starts the book, in chapter 1, is talking about how these came to be, and how, like when I say how these came to be, is basically like a lot of Aristotle's works weren't the published books that we see. A lot of it is actually all the stuff that we have from Aristotle is his personal note takings, that because they're the only things that seem to have survived supposedly from the start of this book. A lot of the published works didn't make it. So it's really important to see how they kind of, I don't know if it's people's interpretation of his personal note takings, or if it's just understanding what he kind of sets out to do, so that you can kind of gain an understanding of what they set out to do, but then also how you think about that process, and if it's the same as yours. Because I think that's one of the good things is, you just don't take everything as it is. Like you're always going to have your interpretation of it as well. So it's always, I feel like it's just kind of intermingling ideas. Again, perspective. I think that's a big one.
Nice. Well, I was thinking a nice way to wrap it up so that we can shout out all these books that we have read is to do a quick fire, like go around, maybe give top 3 suggestions potentially, music or non-music, that's fine. Does anybody want to kick this off, or shall I try? Jack?
Oops. Okay. Right. Well, I will mention the book that I started off with, which is Oliver Sacks' The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. I've been really enjoying that. I think it's really good. One that I've not talked about that I think Reese, you'll immediately go, that was on my list, is Effortless Mastery by Kenny Verner. That's a really, really great book to read. There you go. That's the one. Really important book, I think, especially for improvisers, for people that are just trying to understand the relationship to music. I think there's a really full-bodied view of that relationship. It's really great. And I think he writes in a really clear and concise way as well. So it's a lot of fun to kind of really read that and kind of unlock your feelings on the instrument. Let's see, what else would I choose? That's a tough one. I might have to look at the old the bookcase.
I'm sort of thinking the same. I'm like, what do I really want to recommend right now? And I'm like, this one.
I'm gonna have a quick relook at some of mine, so I'm gonna disappear off the screen.
Shall I jump in, or do you want to get to your final one, Jack?
I will say this. I know a lot of people have already heard of this book, but I still think it's a great book, which is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which I was talking to somebody recently about this book, actually. it's one that like a lot of musicians know. They know about it. They enjoyed it. But there's some really great writing in that book as well, just about what it means to be an artist, the practice of it as well. I suppose what it means as well in the modern era, whatever that really means, in the metaverse. Yeah, that would be another one then. So The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Those are my suggestions then.
Nice. All right, I'm going to jump in and agree with you on Effortless Mastery. My dissertation supervisor gave me her copy when I was writing my dissertation. For whatever reason, she thought it was a good time to introduce me to it. And yeah, it's one of those books that like really just changed, I guess, my life. Like it really changed the way that I look at things, and I'm always recommending it to people. So I'd say that's definitely up there. Another one that I really enjoyed reading is a book by a piano player called Fred Hirsch called Good Things Happen Slowly. And it basically just details his life as a piano player, but also as, yeah, like, I won't ruin a book actually, because there's so many little bits that, yeah, I don't want to give too much away. But anyway, he has a very kind of awkward life, but he still manages to create beautiful music out of it. And I found that to be really interesting. And the I'm kind of torn between two books. One of them, yeah, I'll go with that. Descartes Meditations. I read tons of that when I was in high school because I had to, and it was at a time when my brain somehow worked with books, and I also got to write on them. And I just enjoyed studying his philosophy. I thought it was super interesting. It was the first time I'd ever been challenged by literature, because when you're in high school, it's, I don't know, you're reading stories for the most part, but yeah, in this class we had to try and understand what he was talking about in his books, and yeah, that was super interesting. So I'd say Effortless Mastery, Good Things Happen Slowly, and Descartes Meditations.
Nice. Yeah, I need to get my hands on Effortless Mastery because you've said so many good things about that recently. I've not had the chance to read that one yet. But yeah, top three for me. I can't really. I feel like it's just been so long since I've actually finished a book, but I don't know. Ones that I've really enjoyed recently. I've got this one here, a music theory one. Is it Vincent Persichetti, the Harmony, 20th Century Harmony. I've got this one. I've taken off the thing, so it's just hardback. But yeah, that one, I've really enjoyed that one, giving me a better understanding of lots of different kind of concepts. And yeah, probably just the philosophy ones. Definitely this one. I'm really enjoying this one. So the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and then yeah, I'll probably just say Aristotle's Politics as well. That's the one I was just mentioning. So that's my top three at the moment.
Cool. Well, those are our book choices. This is a really kind of interesting and different conversation for us here on Sitting In as well. Thanks for listening. And as always, if you would like to support the podcast, I'm not wearing one today, unfortunately, but you can see the two boys are. You can support the podcast by buying from our merch store as well. All proceedings help run the podcast. They help us do new things and have kind of new projects. You can see we've got mugs, we've got sweaters, we've got all kinds of things, great materials. So just know that any of your donations or purchases really help the podcast out. And as always, if you want to caffeinate us and help us really run on the bean juice, we also have a link below for buy me a coffee. So that's right. So I'm sure you'll see that in the description as well. But yeah, thanks for listening. And it's been really interesting to cap this off. And I'm sure we'll be back next week for something else fun and different. But we'll see you soon. Bye.